Hey guys, welcome back to the Bookcase build series. So in the last episode, we flattened all of our panels. In this episode, we're going to cut our dados into the side pieces to accept our shelves. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We're gonna take this board today and cut 3 dados and then a set of 3 grooves. So if you can see here, I already did it on one of the sides. So when I say dado, this here is a dado groove. So it's going across the grain, the direction of the grain in the wood. And it's about, if you can see here, about half of the thickness of our side of our shelf. So this groove here, the shelf is gonna sit inside, and that's what's gonna give it its support. This is a groove. This is going with the grain. This is gonna support one of our cross pieces that we're gonna put underneath the shelf so that we don't get any bowing or cupping from the weight of books being on the shelf over time. We've got this one to cut, we've got this one to cut, and we've got, keep banging into the shit, Matt. And we've got one on the bottom to cut. You'll see this one down here is a lot longer. This is for our kick plate or our toe kick or whatever you want to call it. This is going to be on the bottom so that you can't see underneath the bookcase as it's sitting on the floor. It's going to be something that has a bit of almost like on cabinets. So if you see on like the bottom of kitchen cabinets, it kind of goes in. That's called the toe kick. It's a place for your toes to go when you're standing close to the bookcase. I don't know that you're ever going to be getting that close to it here, but it gives you that little bit of room if you're working on putting something on the top of the case or something like that. So I don't know if my breath is catching on camera or not, but it's cold today. So the first thing you're going to want to do is take your side and figure out what you want to be your show side. So if you're similar to mine and you're using this pine to do it, you may have some tear out or defects on one of the sides of the shelf, bad grain, a big knot, something like that. You might want to put that to the inside of the case where once it's full of books, it's going to kind of hide those blemishes or ugliness in the wood. So you're going to want to take a look at both sides and figure out which side do you want to be your show side, your outside piece. That's the side that we're not going to cut. We're going to cut on the inside. So taking a look at this is a really nice side. I'm going to use this as my outside. And I mean, this one ain't bad either, but it's got a little bit more tear out there. So there's a little bit more tear out on this side. So I'm going to use this for my inside. The bottom shelf, we want to have a 4-inch kick plate or toe kick at the bottom of the shelf, 4 inches off the ground. So we're going to measure from the bottom of our shelf up 4 inches. I've got my ruler here on the bottom, and this ruler is a little bit over 1 inch wide, so that's okay. I want that because we've got a 1-inch reveal. I'm lining up the end with the bottom and then coming up 4 inches and just putting a little nick right on that 4-inch mark. I've got my little 6-inch square here, and I've got it set to the 1-inch mark. And if you remember, we're recessing these shelves 1 inch back from the front of the shelf. So this is going to be kind of a marking of as far as we want to go with that line. Now I come through with my longer square, and I put my knife in that little nick that we made, that registration mark. And then I bring the square up to that mark, up to the blade. So now I know this square is right at the 4-inch mark. So I'm starting at that little pencil line that we just left at the 1-inch mark, and I'm very gently running down the length of the square, making sure not to go past that 1-inch pencil line, because any knife marks that you make, unless you plane them out later, are going to show. So if your square does not go all the way across, like this one does, right? It stops about halfway. These shelves are fairly wide, and you don't have one that goes all the way across. Hopefully you've planed this nice and square and all your sides are square, but essentially put your knife in that registration mark you just made, bring your square up to it, and continue your cut. You're taking this side all the way back to the end. You're doing very gentle passes these first couple cuts, just enough to mark the wood and just ensure that your line is all the way across and square. So now come back through with your ruler and just double check that both sides, this is dead on 4 inches and we are dead on 4 inches. This is why squaring up your wood and making it everything 90 degrees and perfect is really important, because it really helps with aligning everything. Once you've got that mark in place, now you can come through back to where you started, put your knife in that registration mark, your square up to it, and now you can start to pull a little harder, a little more pressure. Once you've got 4 or 5 lines or passes through, you can come through almost freehand. If you're not confident in your cutting, your hand, your steadiness of your hand, don't do this, but you can come through and press a little harder and really dig that line in good. Now we're going to do something a little bit different. In previous videos, when you're cutting a dado or anything like that, what you would do is take your piece, which is 11/16 thick in this case, put it up against that initial cut that we made, and then put a knife nick in for the thickness and cut that, and that goes in. If you want to do that, you can do that. However, this case, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to cut the dados to be 1/2 inch thick. What that's going to do is that means that groove is going to be a lot thinner than this. Well, not a lot thinner, but it's going to be thinner than our piece, our shelf piece. What we're going to do is we're going to come back through and cut kind of almost a rabbet into the side of our piece of wood. What that's going to allow us to do is it's going to hide the top of our dado cut. So for beginners, if you're working on this and you're trying to mate 2 pieces together, you could have some slop in there. So by doing this method, it's going to allow us to kind of really pair into that. We can cut this a little thick at first, fit it to our dado groove and see how it fits. If it's a little too tight, we can pare some off. And if for some reason in one spot we maybe cut a little bit too deep and we have a groove, that little step up is going to cover that. It's going to hide that crime, and it's going to make it look nice and flush and tight against our shelf. Another great benefit of that is it gives you some top space to sand or plane down if you have some additional tear out or you want to plane something out. As you're working through this, you get a ding or something in here, or you've got pencil marks or something you want to sand down. It gives you that ability to sand that top down or planes that top down a little bit, and it won't affect your groove. If you're just taking the dado and making it the thickness of the shelf, you really can't sand this down after you cut that dado, because you're now thinning out the wood and you're going to open up gaps. Now, all I'm going to do is come in here from our original mark, line up our 4. So I wouldn't go off the side if your measurements are a little bit off or whatever. Go off this original line. So we've got the 4 lined up perfect with our first mark. We're just going to come in now and mark just a little bit of a reference mark, just a nick right at the 4.5 mark. So we can do the same down here if we want to ensure that we're 1/2 inch thick, just to make sure. Now we've already got our pencil line up here for our 1 inch reveal. So again, find your nick, put your knife in it, and we're going to start with same thing as before, just a gentle pull. So we're putting that 1/2 inch in, and we're ensuring that we're in that same groove. Double check everything. We are 1/2 inch thick there, 1/2 inch thick there, and 1/2 inch thick there. Perfect. All right. In this case, you can register off the bottom if everything's square to cut this line across here, but we want to put a relief cut in across. So in this case, you can come across and do that. You can put your square up here and mark that line, or if you're more comfortable, you can take a 1/2 inch chisel, which is the thickness of this. If you put it up there, you'll see, boom, dead on, lines line right up with it. What you can do, what I would do, is come a little bit. So this is our line, our 1 inch mark. I'd come in just a little bit from that. Make sure you're lined up, you're perfectly parallel, and just tap it. So what that's going to do is break the fibers between these two, so we don't have to worry about that. And we're not going all the way to our line, so that as we chop everything out, we don't mess up this end. At the end, we want a nice, crisp 90-degree line here. Now we're going to take our 1-inch chisel and press towards the our planing stop or registration point. Whatever this thing is pressed up against, that's the direction we want to push. So what I'm going to do is come up here and register against that line we just made, and I'm going to just gently press in and flick that wood out. I'm not digging deep. That was maybe a 32nd of an inch, maybe a 64th of an inch. It's just a hairline to start registering this line a little bit more. So I'm going to do that all the way down this line now. Sometimes you'll feel that gently pressing, and you'll feel it hit the end, right? And you can see like a little bit of fuzzies like that left. If you can see that, don't worry about that. That's totally fine. We're just pressing. You can feel that audible click as it goes in. We're not pressing deep, just enough to start registering that line. Now, if you're not confident in this and you're worried that, oh, I'm going to press too hard and I'm going to blow this side out, start on this side first. This is our bottom, right? So this is going to be covered by the shelf itself and the kick plate that's going to be on the front right here. So if you start on the back side on the bottom, that'll build up that confidence to do that, to be able to do this step without pushing through. I would just use hand pressure in this case on these first few cuts. This is why a very sharp chisel is important. Your tools should always be super sharp when you're doing this, but I wouldn't go with a hammer in this case. Why? Is because that wood, that little lip, is just as deep as we cut it with our marking knife. That's maybe a 64th or 32nd of an inch deep, right? So if you're hammering at it, it's really going to be real easy to blow this edge out and just have tear out, and that's not what you want. So we want nice, crisp, clean lines here. So just hand pressure for these first few cuts. We've got that all the way marked all the way down. What I'm going to do is come through with my marking knife again. If you're not confident in this step, you can use a chisel, which is very gentle pressure. But what I'm going to do for these first few passes, register that knife in that knife wall and make another couple passes, and then repeat the same process again. What I should have talked about in the beginning is how deep we're going, right? We're going halfway to our thickness of our shelf. So if you're, in your case, if you're a 1-inch thick shelf on the side, or the sides of your bookcase is 1 inch thick, you're going to want to go 1/2 inch deep. How you can mark that to make sure that you don't go too deep in the sides of your case. You can take a ruler, go on the side of the board, and measure down your thickness, half the thickness of your board, and put a pencil line there. You can do what's called a marking gauge, something like this, where it's made to score wood. You can set that depth that this cutter comes out, half the thickness of your wood, and mark along that side. However you want to do it, we're marking so that we don't go deeper than that 5/16 or 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch, whatever you're working with, that depth, right? So here's the groove that we're starting to cut. You can do this before you make your cut if you want, or during, if you're confident enough. Now we're just going to continue chopping along this side and clearing out the wood for maybe 1 or 2 more passes, and then we're going to switch it around to the other side. All right, back in against our wall. We're just going to do the same process now on this side as we did before. So we're going to go into our knife wall real gentle, flicking out our waste as we go. when you're flipping your board back and forth or around on your bench, or just in general every once in a while, take a second to clean off the shavings on your bench. As you're hammering down or you're pressing down on this wood, a little chip like this underneath your board could put a dent or ding in, and you'll flip the board over and your showpiece has a million different dings and dents in it right now. Then that's not going to look good. We want to try to minimize that as much as possible. So clean off your bench, have a nice clean work surface. Every time you chop, clear all those chips off. All right, so not sure if you can see the mark here. Let me try to darken it for you. So that's our depth line, right? And if you can tell with the chisel against our wall here, we are pretty much down to depth all the way on both sides. So what I'm going to do now is just chop another chisel relief cut, and then we're going to start hogging out some of this waste on the inside, and I'll show you a couple different methods to do that. So if you can see right here, I've got this like pyramid of wood left from our chiseling. So I'm going to come about halfway down with my 1/2-inch chisel, and I'm going to, instead of coming at it straight, I'm going to come at it on an upward angle. And I'm just going to pop that off. Then I'm going to half that remaining stock off between our line and the top, and then come down to my line and bring that all the way down to my line. Now I'm going to do the same on the other end here, still not going all the way to our 1-inch mark. I'm going to come in here, kind of chisel that down, and then come in with the chisel and kind of pear cut that down a little bit just to give some relief when we start clearing out the waste. Now, if you're worried about coming in here with an exact 1/2-inch chisel, what you can do is get a smaller chisel, maybe 3/8 or 1/4 inch, and do the same thing. You just have to do some cuts along the side like that. But we want to hog out this waste inside of here. And to do that, we're going to use this little 1/4 inch chisel. So if you've got something to press against, you can just kind of come in here, start at the top. Don't go all the way down to your line, your depth line. Just start at the top, and you can kind of press cut out a majority of that waste wood. But you'll notice when you get to the end here, you're going to bottom out. You're not going to be able to go all the way through. What I'm going to do is just lift it up. I'm going to rotate over so that we're bevel side down. And I'm just going to keep going. So this takes a little bit more hand-eye coordination. You don't want to slip out of the groove and scratch up your show surfaces. So just make sure if you need to use 2 hands, or you can even come through and grab it like this and just kind of use your hand, the back of your other hand, to kind of bump it along. If you want to use a mallet, you can, just very gentle taps. Being mindful not to go too deep. And clearing out that waste wood. Just keep in mind that if you're using the chisel, the bottom of your groove might look a little rough like this. That's totally okay. That's totally okay. The shelf is going to come in here. It's going to hide that anyway. So if all you have is this chisel, just keep using this little 1/4 inch chisel and clearing down till you get down to your depth. So a way to test that is to take your square and press it against that. Set that to the depth that you want. I'm not going to adjust this because this is to my 1 inch. But you could set it to the depth that you want and make sure that you're down to depth all the way. Another thing, if you used a marking gauge to mark the depth on the end of your board, you can use that as well. Set that in the groove, the cutter in the groove, and you can see right here we still got a little wobble, so we're a little bit deep in spots, right? Or a little bit, still a little bit to go. Down here we're looking pretty good. Over here, not so much. So another tool that we can use to get down to depth is something like this. This is called a router plane. These come in all different sizes, shapes, configurations. A bunch of different people made these. They sell them. This one I got on Amazon pretty cheap. I think it was under $100 to be sure. Definitely under $100. You can find them at swap meets. They're usually a little bit more than hand planes and things like that because people think they're unique or something. So they're a little bit pricier, but it's totally reasonable to buy one. So basically what this is just a chisel. Essentially a chisel blade on the end of a flat plane. So you can set this to your depth and push along that groove and it'll cut that groove down to the exact depth that you want. Sometimes they have pointy ends, sometimes they have flat chisel ends like this. Doesn't matter, whatever works for you. I'll show you how to use it right now. So we've got our plane blade down, or our router plane down now. And essentially what I'm gonna do is just put the plane in the groove and I'm just going to kind of work it back and forth. So a few cuts like that. And then clear out the wood. So once you're down to depth, take this opportunity to come through with your chisel and just make sure that those side walls are all the way down, nice and flush. Little nibs left, cut them off because that will stop pieces from coming in and fully seating. We want them to seat all the way down so that we get as much glue surface as we can. We've got our groove cut. The last thing we need to do is cut this to full depth. So we've got this little bit left here. What we're going to do is the same thing we did on the other end when we cut down to our depth. We're just going to half that distance and press down. Now, again, if you are worried about mangling your sides with the 1/2 inch chisel, switch to a smaller one, that's fine. We're just paring that down until we get perfect with our line, which is right there. And here, clean up the corners. Now, when you're cleaning up these corners, do not pry back. You're going to want to pry back to clear out the waste. You don't want to do that because that's how you're going to roll these edges. That's how you're going to mar them up. So you're just pressing straight down. And then you can press this way to kind of flick some of that wood out. Come in through here, bevel down, clean that out. Pulling up gently, scraping it, making sure that you're nice and flush. Cleaning out any bits of scrap. Nice. Now we'll come in through here with our square and just ensure that we are flat all the way across. We've got a little bit right here left to clean. There we go. Nice. Okay. We've got our first dado cut that's going to accept our bottom shelf. I'm going to do this process again 14 inches up from the top of our shelf, or the top of our dado. We're going to go 14 inches up. Do this same process again, cut another one, and then we're going to cut our top shelf. So we'll have our bottom shelf, middle, and top shelf. I'm not going to film that because it's just the same process over and over and over. I'll be back with the magic of editing right now. All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3 dados cut. These are going to hold all 3 of our shelves. Now we need to start cutting the grooves for the support pieces that are going to support these shelves when they're under weight of heavy books. So we've got our 6-inch square set to 2 inches. What we're going to do is come from the front face and just leave a little nick mark right here. And then one further down. If you have to flip it around to get a good registration, you can. So all of our support pieces are going to be 1 inch back from the edge of the shelf, which means 2 inches back from the front. So we've got that 2-inch reveal. Then you can come in with your square. This is our 2-inch mark. We'll just confirm. Yep, looking good. All right, so we're cutting all these the same way we did the rest of them. so that we don't have to match piece to piece. We're going to make them all 1/2 inch deep. Now we're basically going to do the same process as before when we cut our dados, except we're going to be doing it on these grooves. The reason they're grooves, they're going with the grain. So this might chop a little bit different. You need to be cautious of that. You can't really just start, especially on end grain where the edge of the wood here where it's not really supported. If you come in here and just start bashing away at this, you could really easily split a piece of wood off, especially closer to the edge like this. So we have to be a little bit more gentle when we're coming down to this. And the wood's going to split a little bit different. You're not going with the grain. You're not having that nice clean cut as before. You're going to get like bits of broken off grain like this. It's basically where you're splitting the grain vertically. It'll just cut a little bit different. It takes a second to get used to. Now, if you're not confident in this or you're nervous about it, start on the back side first like we're doing here. So that way, if you do have an accident, you blow that out, you're not going to see it because the toe kick's going to cover it, right? So just be a little bit careful. This is the side, doing this back side first is the side you get your practice on. All right, so now once we've got 3-4 passes in with the knife, just gentle taps. I'm basically just letting the weight of the hammer dictate how deep we go. If you want to mark the side, the end grain, you can for the depth on this side. But as far as this side goes, we know as far as deep as we're going because we're just going to go down until we match our dado depth. So this isn't going to split like going across the grain. This is going to kind of peel up a little bit different. When you get to the end, be careful not to blow through and smack into the edge of your dado wall. Remember to do your relief cuts, and then we'll come through and use our router plane. So you can kind of, when you're starting, come from the outside like this and just kind of rotate one side, making this almost like a pivot. And that'll help start that initial cut down to your depth. Helps slice the wood a little bit better. You kind of rotate that. So we've got our groove now cut for our toe kick plate as well as our shelf. So this is one down. We've got 2 more to do. So we've got another smaller groove to do here and one to do here. So those are going to be 1.5 inches deep from the bottom of the shelf. Same process as our kick plate, except down here, we're not going all the way to the bottom. So just cleaning up this last groove here. Again, if you want to use your router plane, put it in like this with the chisel almost all the way to the end and then gently pull it back till it just touches the backside. And then you can kind of clean up the front here, or this side of the groove. And then to get this side, just flip it around, do the same thing, press it in gently, go back until you just touch the back of the chisel in this plane, just touches the top of the dado. And then you can pull in from this side direction and gently clean out everything down to depth. So that's it for today. We've cut our grooves. We've got all of our grooves cut. We've got all of our dados cut. We're ready to start cutting the rabbets into the shelves so that we can start mating these two sides together with shelves and start forming an actual structure of a bookcase. We still have the top to do after that, which is going to be similar. We're still just going to cut dados and mate the two together. We're going to do a little bit different. And then we still have to cut our rabbet groove into the back of both of our sides to be able to put our plywood backing on. So if you don't want to miss those videos in upcoming series, subscribe down below and click the bell so that you don't miss them and you're informed of them. Give me a thumbs up on this video, comment down below, let me know how you think the bookcase is coming, and I will see you on the next one.